Hello, this week we talk about sustainability and the chapters 9 and 10. Chapters 9 and 10 really kind of focus on corporations and the environment, how they work with the environment, what kind of environmental activities happen, damage that has happened to the environment, ways to restore the environment, and a variety of things, and how companies are working through this. Okay, so chapters 9 and 10 are included in this week's readings. Okay, so the natural environment. So, of course, everything that happens with businesses happens within constraints of this planet and its available resources. So what is the natural environment? What are those resources? And what are the constraints that we have on those resources? So including things like our water, air, animals, living things, resources that are mined, etc. Okay. The idea, of course, is that if we're going to continue over time, we have to use these things sustainably so that we preserve for future generations. We have some of those natural assets or natural capital that is not renewable, that once it is gone, it is gone, and then businesses and people will have to find different ways, different products, different technology to make those things work. We have other natural resources that will regenerate themselves, but it takes time. And so if we are using more than we are regenerating, we can cause an issue where we're running out faster than we actually plan to be. So sustainable development is what I was talking about here, where we meet the needs of our present needs for people, corporations, but we don't compromise the ability for future generations to have access to those resources. Okay, so then it talks about sustainable development, which also includes that the use of natural resources must be distributed equitably between developed and developing countries and between present and future generations. That equitably thing doesn't always happen. There are a lot of developing countries with access to natural resources that developed countries do not have access to. And so sometimes there is not equitable exchange in that, but we have corporations that are taking advantage of the fact that they are developing countries. Also, if you were not aware of terminology, developed countries and developing countries is the language that replaced first world and third world countries several years ago. So even though people still say first world countries and third world countries nationally or globally, those terms are no longer used. The United Nations and other countries say developed and developing rather than first world and third world. Okay, do we have threats to the Earth's ecosystem? Yes, we have some threats that have we've discovered and we've found ways to rectify them. And we found different ways around it, but then we have other threats where we haven't figured out resolutions for them or supplies of them. So one thing, limited supplies of critical resources. There's finite amounts of certain resources. A lot of the resources that we mine, there are finite amounts of. There are finite amounts of fresh water. Now, fresh water does renew itself. But again, where we talk about if we're using more than the replacement rate, we can still cause issues. Unpredictable weather changes. So unpredictable weather changes have a lot of different impacts. We have everything from an increasing number of storms to changing growing seasons for farmers, to areas of land that are no longer available. We'll look at this also when we look at coffee and chocolate, which have to be grown in very, very specific weather conditions, and that the amount of land available with those particular weather conditions is decreasing on a regular basis. So there's this fear that if we don't figure out either how to grow coffee and chocolate in different weather conditions, or to stop our weather condition changes from happening, that both of those things will no longer be around at some point. So there's often, bananas are also another one that have been warned of extinction. But coffee and chocolate, often they talk about will become extinct if we cannot figure out ways to either slow down unpredictable weather changes or other ways to grow them. And then, of course, increased political risk. We see this all the time. Every time we have a change of administration in the United States, whether it's every 4 years or every 8 years, but every time we have an election, we have political risk for businesses. And when I talk about that, it's not saying that every single president brings risk. It's that it's difficult for businesses to plan for the long term if there is chance that laws and regulations are going to change every time we have a change in an administration. And so that is the volatility there, that we have frequently changing laws. Next week, we're going to be talking about businesses and the government specifically. So we'll talk more about that political risk and how heavily government policy impacts different businesses. Okay. Of course, we have great opportunities. A lot of that opportunities comes in the face of technology, innovation, finding different solutions. You know, one of the solutions we're looking at right now, where we talk about the access to oil, which we use to create gasoline, that there's a finite amount of oil and there's worries that we will run out someday. And so we're looking for what are alternatives to things that normally use oil or natural gas. So we have things like ethanol, where we make fuel from soybeans. It's partially soybeans and partially oil and stuff like that. But we start looking for alternatives for manufacturing where we're not using this. Another big heavy user of oil is plastic. Oil is the #1 ingredient in plastic production. So we look at how can we reduce the amount of plastic that we make. How can we change the plastic is also horrifically bad for the environment because it takes a very long time for it to break down, and it releases toxins the entire time it is breaking down. So every time you see a plastic container on the road, that's causing environmental damage. So there are opportunities for new products, new innovations, new things. But, you know, sometimes we don't know what the future is, so we don't even know if these new innovations will have benefits or not. One, I think, needs a lot more research and things are electric vehicles. So we say we move to electric vehicles, so we no longer have this dependence on oil and natural gas, which is a finite resource. There's only so much of it. However, we do have to mine a lot of the products that go into those EV batteries. So we still have issues where, yes, we have a new technology and that technology doesn't require oil, but it does require other natural resources. And what is the capability of those natural resources? So there's still this impact that we're still mining. We're just mining for different things right now. We also don't know about the long-term ramifications of disposing batteries. Batteries are also toxic, shouldn't be in landfills. They can cause fires and all sorts of other problems. So we still have this looking for different kinds of solutions. Okay, so different factors we have that are causing the current ecological crisis, and scientists sounding the alerts that in the future we're going to have even more problems, are the population explosion and economic development. So the more people we have on Earth, the more that we're pulling from the Earth's resources, and the more that we develop, the less land is available for agriculture, the less green land we have, which contributes to air quality. Of course, trees make oxygen, which contributes to air quality. So when we have a lot of economic expansion, a lot of trees and forests get cut down, which then decreases air quality. So finding ways to kind of balance all of those things. As far as population explosion, we've had declining birth rates since 2008. Those continue to decline every year. So we're seeing less and less population. In fact, in the last 4 or 5 years, we have not even met replacement figures of birth rates. So we're not having enough new people to replace the people that are dying of old age. So we're actually going to see a declining total Earth population. Okay. We have many more people added during the second 50 years than during the first. However, right now we have where the rate of growth could stay the same. As I said, the world's population has actually been declining. Economic development. We take resources from the earth in order to build houses, in order to build cities, but one of the main things with that, like I said, if we're taking away greenery, we're taking away trees, we're taking away other stuff. So of course, like sustainable development where we're still allowing for green spaces. A lot of the issues that doesn't get talked about is the extreme amounts of consumption and waste. So when we look into some of the special topics, we're going to start to see a lot more information on what waste does. So we as human beings, especially in highly capitalist economies, produce extreme amounts of waste. And that waste has to go somewhere. Some waste is easier dealt with than others, but what do we do with garbage? If we just dump it in landfills, what happens to that land? What kind of toxins are we putting out? Are we endangering the soil around things? Are we hurting the water? There's a lot of different issues with this. We also have where, as I said, when we look at especially the fashion, a lot of our fashion waste gets sent to developing countries where it is causing massive problems there. We have countries like Ghana and Cambodia that are just drowning in fashion waste and the garbage that the US and Europe sends out to there so that it's not in our own landfills. So we're creating a lot of issues there, and now those countries are trying to find ways to deal with, what do we do with all this waste? What do we do to help reduce the amount of waste? Okay, and carrying capacity. Okay, again, there's only so many resources on Earth. Okay, some of those resources are finite, meaning once we use them, they will no longer be available to us, while other resources are reusable. One of the things I always think about, especially during this chapter, is if you've seen the movie WALL-E, put out by Disney many, many years ago. But in this movie, the Earth has been abandoned. People are living in spaceships above the Earth. They're waiting for Earth to be livable again. But when they show pictures of the Earth at the beginning of this movie, there's garbage everywhere. And so there's so much garbage piled up everywhere that the Earth has stopped growing things. Okay. So what they do is they send robots out looking regularly for green stuff. So looking for, has stuff started growing again? Has the Earth repaired itself to be able to grow stuff again? And this is a regular kind of issue because if any of you grew up on a farm, you'll know that overgrowing on land or growing too much of one crop destroys the soil. That's why we now do crop rotations, because we understand that if we aren't taking care of the soil, we're going to get less yield. It's going to be harder to grow things in the future. And so we've discovered that we have to rotate crops so that we don't damage soil, like corn. We grow a lot of corn, but corn is bad for the soil. And a field can only grow so much corn before we have to fix the soil by trying different products. And so there are entire research. So when I worked at Iowa State, that's one of the areas that I worked with, because I worked in the College of Agriculture, was the research farm, where they were looking at ways to do crop rotation that benefited the soil the best, but also gave the farmers the same amount of income. So what else can we grow other than corn or soybeans that we can work into this rotation that fix the soil and help repair the soil for future years, but also create the same amount of income and demand that corn and soybeans do?